The first scream came from the land itself, a low groan carried by the wind, the kind that makes your chest tighten before your mind can explain why. It rolled across the ranch at dawn, slipping between fence posts and rusted gates, pressing against the old farmhouse windows like a warning that had arrived too late. The sign had been there for years, nailed crookedly to a cedar stake at the edge of the lower pasture. Don't look down there. That's off. Most people laughed when they saw it. Some thought it was a joke. Others thought it was a threat. The rancher, Silas Crow, had stopped thinking about it at all. Until the morning he looked. Silas was a man carved by dust and responsibility. The ranch had been in his family for 3 generations, passed down with more debts than memories, more silence than stories. His father had worked himself into the ground and left behind a land that looked wide and generous but hid 1,000 quiet dangers. Silas inherited it all at 32. Along with a grief he never learned how to speak. He believed in rules because rules kept things from falling apart. Feed the cattle at dawn. Fix the fence before winter. Don't ask questions about the lower pasture. Don't look down there. The lower pasture sat beyond a shallow ridge, a bowl of land that dipped suddenly as if the earth had decided to hide a secret. It was fenced off, overgrown, and avoided by the cattle, who skirted its edge like prey sensing a trap. Silas had been told, as a boy, that it was unstable ground, that sinkholes and gas pockets made it unsafe. His father's voice echoed in his memory whenever he passed the sign, sharp and final. Off limits means off limits, but life has a way of pushing people toward the very lines they promised never to cross. That winter had been brutal. A late freeze killed half the grass. A storm tore down the eastern fence, and one of the calves went missing. Silas searched for hours, his boots sinking into mud, his breath coming out in short white bursts. As the sun climbed higher, he noticed something that made his heart stutter. Fresh tracks, leading straight toward the lower pasture. He followed them without thinking. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the land itself was resisting him. The sign creaked as he passed it. The words faded, but still legible, still warning. Silas told himself he was being foolish. He told himself it was just a calf, just a low spot in the land, just another problem he had to solve alone. When he reached the ridge and looked down, the world seemed to tilt. The pasture wasn't empty. It wasn't just land at all. It was scarred. The ground below was split by a massive pit, wider than a barn, its edges jagged and raw. Steam rose from it in thin, trembling ribbons. At the bottom, far deeper than Silas thought possible, lay the remains of old machinery, broken fences, and something else that made his stomach turn. Bones. Animal bones. Bleached and scattered, tangled with twisted metal like offerings left behind by time itself. The smell hit him a second later, sour and metallic, burning the back of his throat. Silas staggered back, bile rising. His father's warnings crashed over him, no longer vague or abstract. This wasn't an accident of nature. This was something deliberately hidden, and the horrifying truth settled into his chest with crushing weight. The ranch wasn't just land, it was a grave. For a long time, Silas stood there, frozen between the man he had been and the one he was becoming. He could turn away. He could pretend he'd seen nothing. Patch the fence? Tell himself the calf wandered off? That would be easier. That would be safer. But as he watched the steam curl upward, he realized something else had been trapped down there for decades. The truth, and it was finally breathing. The memories began to surface, uninvited and sharp. His father's temper. The nights when trucks came late, headlights off, engines idling, the way his father would send him inside without explanation. Silas had been a child, desperate to believe in the goodness of the man who raised him. Now that belief cracked, splintering under the weight of what lay below. The calf's body was there too, broken and still. Seeing it snapped something inside him. This wasn't just history. This was ongoing. Whatever the pit was, it was still hungry. Silas did the unthinkable. He climbed down every step toward. The pit felt like a betrayal and a promise at the same time. The ground crumbled beneath his boots, small rocks skittering into the darkness. His heart hammered so loudly he was sure the land could hear it. When he reached the bottom, the air was thick and warm, buzzing faintly, like a machine that never truly shut off. He knelt beside the calf, closed his eyes, and whispered an apology that felt too small for the moment. As he explored the pit, the story revealed itself in pieces. Old barrels stamped with warning symbols, rusted equipment used for dumping, records sealed in warped metal boxes, names and dates scrawled in fading ink. This land had been used to hide waste, dangerous waste, dumped illegally decades ago when regulations were looser and money spoke louder than consequences. Silas's father hadn't just known, he had been paid to look the other way, paid to keep the sign standing, paid to never look down there. The horror wasn't just in the pit. It was in the legacy. Silas climbed out hours later, covered in grime, his hands shaking. The ranch felt different now, smaller, heavier, like it was holding its breath. He spent that night pacing the farmhouse, wrestling with a choice that would define the rest of his life. Exposing the truth would destroy everything. The ranch would be seized. His family name would be dragged through the dirt. People would hate him for what his father did, even if Silas had been a child. Staying silent would be easier. Staying silent would keep the world intact. But at dawn, As the light crept across the fields, Silas realized something that changed him forever. Silence was the real crime. The days that followed were a storm. Authorities came, then reporters, then lawyers. The lower pasture was sealed off, the pit examined, the evidence undeniable. The story spread fast, twisting and growing, painting Silas as everything from a hero to a traitor. Old neighbors stopped waving, some spat at his boots. Others thanked him quietly, their voices breaking as they spoke of illnesses, of animals lost, of questions that finally had answers. The ranch was shut down. The cattle were relocated. The land that had defined Silas's life was taken from him piece by piece. There were nights when he sat alone in the farmhouse, staring at the walls, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. Grief came in waves, not just for his father, but for the man he thought his father had been. Forgiveness felt impossible. Anger felt endless, but something else grew alongside the pain. Purpose. Silas worked with investigators, with environmental groups, with families who had been affected by the contamination. He told the story again and again, each time ripping open old wounds, each time feeling a little lighter when the truth landed somewhere outside his chest. He stopped defending the past and started shaping the future. The sign was taken down, its message no longer needed. People were finally looking. Years passed. The land was cleaned as much as it could be, though scars remained. Silas no longer owned a ranch, but he found work helping others prevent what had happened to him. He spoke at town halls, at schools, at meetings where people didn't want to hear what he had to say. He learned that doing the right thing rarely feels good at first, but it always feels honest. One evening, long after the cameras were gone, Silas returned to the ridge. Grass had begun to grow again, thin but stubborn. The pit was filled, marked, no longer hidden. The wind moved through the field, gentle now, almost forgiving. Silas stood there, a man changed by what he chose to face instead of ignore. He understood then that horror isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a sign we walk past every day, a rule we follow without question, a truth we're afraid to uncover because it might cost us everything. But he also understood something just as powerful. Redemption doesn't come from what we inherit. It comes from what we choose to do when the ground gives way beneath us. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the lines in your own life you've been afraid to cross, take a moment to show your support. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and keep sharing stories that remind us why looking away is never the answer. Because sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't what we see when we look down. It's what happens if we never look at all.